Hi guys, welcome back. This video is part 2 of a guide to surviving rush or glowflies. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, I'd recommend going back there first as I cover the fundamentals of the wave, weapon roles and positions to take on maps. All of the stuff discussed in this video builds on the topics from the previous video, so I'd really recommend watching it first. There's also a correction I need to make, which I'll discuss when talking about the Inkjet during rush. Anyway, if you're new here and find this helpful, consider subscribing as I cover Salmon Run in depth and have a ton of videos specifically aimed at helping people in freelance. I hope you enjoy this and find it helpful. Specials. The only time I see specials used liberally is during rush, and I'd recommend it every time, especially in freelance. It's usually one of the easiest and quickest ways to ensure safety, regain control, or allow egg collection. Specials should be used regardless if it's wave 1 or wave 3, and you shouldn't be afraid of burning all 8 between you just to get through if needed. So let's talk about how to get the most out of these specials during rush. Inkjet. Probably the best special to have at your disposal during rush, as it guarantees your safety, lets you move away from danger, and you can easily shoot the enemies and your teammates below. Worth pointing out that you're not invincible whilst using this special. You can still take damage and die if you don't hover high enough. The Inkjet does 300 damage when you hit a direct shot, and its indirects do between 75 to 100. The blast radius of its shots can take out several enemies at once during rush too. The exhaust of the Inkjet does 120 damage per second, meaning that you can combine both firing and trailing the exhaust over enemies below. The absolute best time to use the special is when you are targeted, as you can do 2 things here. One is lead all the enemies away from your teammates for the duration of the special so that they can safely run eggs. Or secondly, lure all the enemies to the basket so they're concentrated in an area that can be hard focused to create eggs that are easy to run. You can hover over the basket, which adds another layer of safety for you. Of course, there is the use of the Inkjet as immediate protection of you and revival of your teammates, and I'd encourage this too. However, if you really want to maximise the most out of this special and not just use it as a panic button, then timing it to when you're targeted will ensure you get the most out of it. Lastly, don't forget to take advantage of the exhaust. In the first rush video, I mentioned that specials don't cause aggro to shift during rush. However, this isn't true for the Inkjet. My apologies. There was a patch a while ago that causes enemies not to target your Inkjet recall, and I wasn't aware that it had extended to rush. So if you're targeted and your Inkjet finishes, the aggro will switch off of you and target another player who is alive, regardless of where the timer is. In this clip here, shared by Sadface, the lobby is playing at 200% with a 10.3 second timer. Like other footage I've shown, you can see that timings of aggro switches happen at 80, 70, 59, 49, and so on. However, you can notice that when the player's Inkjet is finished, the aggro switches to the other player. This is what was patched. You will have safety when landing your Inkjet, however this forces the timings off from their natural cycle, so it's something to be aware of. In this clip, the timer changed to 70, but after the Inkjet finished, you can see another switch, which happens at around 64 to 63 seconds. However, it will change again at 59 following the natural cycle of the spawn timers. You will have safety when landing your Inkjet, however, this forces the timings off from their natural cycle, so it's something to be aware of. In freelance, it's difficult to communicate this with your team. Hell, even I wasn't aware of this, and I've spent a month researching and analysing this one mode. And I've often seen Inkjet being used as a panic button. Just be cautious when your teammate finishes their Inkjet, as this could catch you off guard. Thank you to Sadface for the clip, and to the lovely people on the Salmon Run server for the clarification with this information. Crab Tank. Crab Tank can be quite a hard special to fully maximise due to its overall slow movement and the length of the special. It can work well during rush, but it needs to be positioned well with full support from the team due to the vulnerability it has. Once you use Crab, you'll have to be fully committed to it for the duration of it. Crab has 4 ways it can cause damage: the turret, the cannon explosion, the cannon projectile itself, and the roll. The turret does 60, the cannon explosion does 100, the cannon projectile does 300, and the roll does 100. These are fixed numbers, so there's no fall-off variation or minimum damage changes. When using the cannon mode, the projectile pierces through all non-armoured enemies and explodes, almost the same way the expulsion works. The projectile will explode and the large radius will also catch other chum in its AoE. This is potentially a way you could use the crab against chum if they're all in a straight path heading towards you. It requires some strategic positioning, however, and is best used this way if you aren't overwhelmed. If you have the Glowflies on you and things are a bit messy, then finding a position to use the crab with the turret mode is usually the best way to use the special. Continually shooting with the turret mode drastically increases the fire rate, with the peak being comparable to the Hydra. This easily shreds through chum and goldies and can allow you to drastically reduce the pressure from the enemies. Moving from left to right is quicker than moving forward and backwards, and the range allows you to take out plenty of the enemies far enough away that your teammates can find time to recover their ink and health, revive each other, and run some eggs. Just make sure the area behind you is clear, as it can be tricky to turn yourself around with a crab without interrupting the turret modes, and you'll take damage too. If your teammates are using crab, be sure to keep an eye on them to keep them safe so they can fully maximise the special. The other way crab can be used is by using its rolling mechanism, and this can be a strategic way to protect yourself if you feel like you have no choice. When rolling, you're able to crush all the chum with ease, leaving only knockback and potential damage from goldies, who will take at least 5 hits. It works the same as a roller in that you'll need to push against the enemies to crush them. This method gives you mobility and speed to move around the map and can help either lead the enemies away from your teammates or help revive teammates who are downed. You shouldn't suffer too much damage when in this mode, but you do have 500 HP overall, so there is a potential your crab could break if weakened quickly by goldies or chum you don't crush. You can also use this method to climb walls and stall if needed, but I think defeating as many enemies whilst you're protected from serious damage is a much more effective way of using the ball. Just be careful when your crab finishes, as there will be some downtime before you can use your weapon again. Booyah Bomb. Booyah Bomb is one of the best specials to have for Rush due to its quick deployment and its ability to protect you by being launched up in the air. Whilst in the air, the enemies cannot reach you, and this affords you safety for the duration of the time you are in the air holding the special. Booyah's total damage is around 600, however the reason this special does well is because of the exceptionally large area it covers when used. Usually used around the basket area, it can completely wipe the area and allow teammates to regain composure and run eggs. It also helps paint the area it's used in, which in of itself can be very helpful to you and your teammates. The best time to use Booyah is when the aggro shifts to you and the enemies are targeting you. Unlike during other wave types, the use of Booyah does not cause targets to switch. Instead, the aggro will remain on you until the timed interval completes and targets change. What this allows is a method to stall and also lure all the enemies on screen towards you into a concentrated area. But you need to be careful. Due to the way in which the enemies move, if you use your Booyah too late, you may not make it up in the air quick enough and die just as you're about to start charging it. Allow yourself some space and a second or two to use it just to ensure you won't get killed during the deployment of it. Whilst in the air, you have around 9 seconds to aim and deploy it. You can use this time to allow your teammates' life rings to pop up, ensuring that you revive them as well as clearing the enemies in the area. If you use Booyah to stall the rush of enemies towards you whilst you have aggro, be mindful of how long you wait in the air before deploying it. As soon as the aggro leaves you, all the enemies that have accumulated will quickly go to their next target and probably kill them very quickly. You need to deploy and destroy the enemies as soon as the build-up of them is enough to completely clear the area around you. Holding on to Booyah for too long and having the aggro change is a bit of a death sentence for your teammates and potentially means your Booyah will not clear the area as well as it could have. Wave Breaker. This is one of the best specials to have during Rush due to its ease and speed of use and its ability to kill all chums that touch the waves. It's exceptionally quick to deploy, which gives you immediate freedom, which is almost invaluable in a wave like Rush. Wavebreaker one-shots all chum that get caught in its radius, and that alone is very helpful in regaining composure in a wave. It also weakens the goldies to allow you to kill them quicker. Wavebreaker is also very useful in that it's a passive special. You deploy it and then move on, without being held back by the duration of it or having to focus on it. It also immediately refills your ink tank, which can be very helpful if you're struggling for ink or have an ink-hungry weapon. If able to, use it after depleting your ink tank so you can make the most of the free ink refill. Wavebreaker is a special that requires some foresight to use. You shouldn't hold on to this special until the last second, as it can take a few seconds from deployment to make any noticeable change to the current state of the wave. You'll want to use this special when you're struggling to run eggs or struggling to maintain an aggressive position, whether this is due to the comp you have or if your teammates keep going down. It's best placed around the position you are in so it gives you protection, but it's also important to recognise the positions on maps where it's most advantageous. An example of this is on Gonefish and Hydroplant. You almost always want to place the Wavebreaker on higher ground on the platforms around the basket as opposed to the floor by the basket itself. This way, the waves will hit all the enemies on the platforms and ground floor by the basket. Unfortunately, Wavebreaker does not continue or count after everybody has died, meaning that using it too late will not save down teammates that cannot be revived before you die. For this reason alone, I encourage you to use this special if one or more teammates are down but before you are the last player alive, as you cannot guarantee that you'll live long enough for somebody else to get revived. Wavebreaker is often considered a weak special due to its limited ways of damaging enemies, rendering it ineffective in a lot of scenarios. However, for Rush it is practically top tier and shouldn't be held onto for fear of using both in one wave. I often use both during Rush and Freelance as it is such an easy way to regain composure and gives much needed breaks to everybody so they can refill their ink tanks and run eggs. Reef Slider. Reef Slider is a solid special for Rush that has positives and negatives associated with its use. It deals 500 damage on anything it touches during its slide, with the explosion at the end causing 700 damage to anything in its relatively large explosive radius. The positive attributes of Reef Slider is that it can immediately clear an area that needs attention. Depending on where you want to use it, you can titrate when to detonate it, giving you freedom to choose a target or area. You will take no damage during the duration of the special after it's started up, and it allows you to move through a map or area very quickly. Its large AoE often allows you to target enemies and revive teammates together. It's often used as a basket clearing special which can provide immediate relief in the short term. The negatives of this special can make it feel useless on occasion. If you're on a small map with little room, you might run the risk of speeding straight into the water or getting hit by an enemy during the startup, which can render the special ineffective. There is also the chance that the special can be cancelled upon use if you're being attacked as it starts up. In addition, after using the special, you are faced with downtime or end lag of the special, which can potentially lead to your death if you're currently being targeted. For this reason, I often find the best time to use the special is when I am not targeted, as this removes the risk of dying after it's finished. Depending on the map and the area in which the enemies are heading, you want to aim your special at the area that is heavily concentrated with chum. Due to the quick deployment of the special, you're able to quickly continue with the wave with very little downtime or punishment, and you have a free ink tank refill to boot. I see this special often used as a panic button, and I generally think it's okay to do this as it can completely clear an area very quickly and there aren't many downsides to doing this. It is a short special with quick benefits, meaning that it doesn't provide long-term relief the way an Inkjet or Crab Tank can. However, removing immediate threats from the vicinity you're in may just be what you need in the moment, and Reef Slider can work perfectly for this. Just as a PSA, you can deliver eggs whilst in Reef Slider form. You may never need to do this, but it's worth sharing as it could help you deliver a final egg. Triple Inkstrike. Triple Inkstrike can work as a special that can clear an immediate area, but it has some downsides that doesn't make it as effective as other basket clearing specials like Booyah and Reef Slider. However, it does allow you to have 3 separate areas that can be targeted, which gives it some versatility in how it can be used. Given its AoE, the Triple Inkstrike can be used to quickly clear an area and help regain stability. It takes about 1 second from when a target is touched for the full explosion to happen, so you cannot guarantee immediate effect from the special. However, it will continue to count if all players go down, meaning it is possible to revive players after you die. The strikes stick to enemies on contact, so it's possible for them to get caught where you don't plan for them to be, especially if you're the person being targeted. On most maps, you're likely positioned close to the basket, so I often throw at least one towards the basket as a failsafe for anybody there to get revived and to take out any stray enemies. The strikes will defeat all chum it touches, but may or may not completely defeat goldies if they're able to run out of the AoE before taking full damage from it. This makes it potentially tricky to see full effect from it, as if the enemies are not concentrating through 1 or 2 choke points, it can be hard to target them. You cannot use your main weapon, sub-weapon, or swim in ink when you deploy this special, which can leave you very vulnerable. For this reason, it's best to use this when you are not targeted, as you run the risk of dying very quickly. It's also important to recognise which direction the enemies are heading from so you can maximise all 3 of the strikes. In Freelance, this may not be possible, and you may end up just deploying them immediately at your feet if needed. However, this may be the most optimal way to use the special, as it can quickly clear the area and allow small downtime to run eggs or regain health or ink. Triple Splashdown. As basket clearing specials go, Triple Splashdown is one of the best to have due to its quick use and immediate payoff. You also have very little downtime after using it and don't run much of a risk taking damage when you deploy it. Triple Splashdown deals 3 blows of damage, 1 from the user itself and from 2 fists that are created whilst in the air. Each of these cause 300 damage, totaling 900 damage altogether. It also has a relatively large AoE that can catch quite a lot of enemies in, making it really effective for immediately clearing the area you're in. There is a chance that the special gets cancelled, especially if you're targeted. However, if you do die in the process of using it, the other 2 fists will complete their cycle and work as intended, meaning you will still find some value out of it. However, it's best not to panic and activate this if you've taken substantial damage and are at risk of dying imminently, unless you're the last alive and feel like you have no choice. This special can be used when you're targeted or when you're not targeted. The main thing to remember is that if you are targeted, there is a small end lag at the end of the special that could potentially leave you vulnerable, but usually in Rush, you tend to clear the entire area, meaning you shouldn't find yourself at risk immediately afterwards. If you're not targeted, this removes this risk, but also means you won't necessarily catch all the enemies around. However, it's still really effective when used without aggro. Due to its large AoE, you can revive teammates with this special as well, so it may well be worth combining enemies and reviving teammates to get much more value out of the special. In terms of using this in a panic, it is one of the specials that won't see any harm from doing so. However, like all specials, it's best used when you can maximise its effects and ensure complete clearing of an area without dying in the process. Like other basket clearing specials, its effects are short-lived. However, when used well, this may be the most optimal way to provide stability and the chance for your teammates to take a breather. Kraken Royale. Kraken is a very powerful special during Rush, as it provides something that no other special does: invincibility for the entire duration. This alone makes it exceptionally good at turning the tide of a game and potentially reversing a snowball, and therefore improving your chances to pass the wave. Kraken has 2 ways of dealing damage, with its charged attack or by jumping with it. The charged attacks do 650 but also cause you to charge off in the desired direction, and the jumping attacks do 250. You will take no damage from any enemies for the duration of the special. Just watch for bounce back from the enemies and of course stay away from the grates. Kraken has quite a slow startup and has some punishing end lag, so it's very important to use the special in a way that doesn't leave you dead either upon activating it or after it finishes. For these reasons, Kraken is best used immediately as soon as the aggro switches to you. If you can time this right, your special won't be cancelled and you will have the attention of all the enemies on you. Here you can do a few things. You can lure all the enemies away from your teammates so that they can either revive themselves or run eggs. This is effectively stalling, but done in a way that allows your team to fulfill an objective while still actively killing chum. If QUOTA isn't the main focus, then Kraken can be used for complete protection to regain control. The jumping attack should mostly be used here, as this allows better mobility with the special and prevents you from taking the enemies too far away. More often than not, taking the enemies to the basket and defeating them there is usually the best strat, as this objectively helps the game. You're also free to help revive downed teammates if needed. The risk of using Kraken is that its end lag puts you at risk when the special finishes. If you still have aggro on you, it could mean immediate death. If you time it right, however, you can ensure that the aggro switches off you a second or 2 before your special finishes. This is why I'd encourage you to wait until aggro is on you before using the special. However, if you are the last alive and need the protection, then you will still get a lot of value out of the Kraken. If you haven't seen part 1 of this video, I talk about timings during Rush. Kraken benefits from utilising this. Killer Wail 5.1.
I have Wail. Oh, that's shit.
Killer Whale is unfortunately the worst special to have during Rush. It cannot target the chum, leaving only the goldies to be targeted. The Killer Whale kills the goldies very quickly, but this then usually causes the whale to aim at nothing and renders it pretty much useless in a lot of ways. If there is no enemy targeted when used, the whale will point in the camera's direction and fire. Each pair of lasers will then choose randomly to either rotate left or right for its duration. Killer Whale can pierce through enemies, meaning that if chum are caught in the lasers, they will take damage from them, and this can help in some ways. It can also revive your teammates, but this isn't a guarantee, and due to the finicky way it targets enemies, it may not work as intended. This isn't to say you shouldn't use it though, because it is still a special that defeats enemies quickly and gives you a full ink tank immediately afterwards. This is generally, in my opinion, the strongest way to view this special, especially if you have an ink-hungry weapon. If you choose to use Killer Whale, do so after emptying your ink tank, as it is a free way to regain ink and allows you to keep firing without having to stop like you usually do. Strategies and quota. This part of the video will be discussing strategies from here on out, and I just want to stress this from the beginning. Everything here is mostly opinion-based, okay? Whereas the stuff earlier is still opinion-based in a lot of ways, you can argue that community-created resources more or less agree with certain places to stand, how to use weapons and specials, etc. From here on out, it's just me, my knowledge of the game and the experience I've had since 2017. If you disagree with me, if you disagree with me, fight me. No, wait. If you disagree with me, great. Share your reasons in the comment section, because I love hearing people discuss this game. Meeting quota is a bit easier said than done in Rush. Like the rest of the game, during SalmonRun, you need to learn to multitask and not tunnel vision only one objective. It's easier to run eggs with certain weapons, and I'd encourage you to recognise when you are objectively the best player to run for far eggs. But you have to remain fluid with your objectives and recognise when it's beneficial to switch between them. It's impossible to recommend strategies to help with this, as the RNG of the wave means that you can be repeatedly targeted, and this makes it difficult to run for eggs. For this reason, paying attention to target switches is extremely important, because it's usually here that players are caught off guard and taken down. Rush is extremely likely to snowball when one player goes down, so you need to be careful when deciding to run for eggs. 3 things I feel like can help here. The first is that you should always look to deposit eggs when someone uses a special. This is one of the safest times to do it, and often gives you the opportunity to have a small break in between waves of chum. It's really hard to convey this to your team in Freelance, however, and I've noticed that players will watch you use a special and either use theirs at the same time or just do nothing. Take this moment to run eggs if you're struggling for quota. It is by far and away the safest time to do it, especially if it's a special that can comfortably deal with the pressure of being targeted, such as Inkjet, Kraken or Crab Tank. If you notice your teammate leading the horde away from you whilst using a special, they're likely telling you to run eggs. I'd also recommend doing this yourself if you notice eggs are not being deposited at a good speed, or you're finding your comp can't quite find enough downtime to do it. Don't wait until 10 seconds left before you realise that quota isn't close to being achieved. Be proactive and keep an eye on how it looks by half the wave remaining. Specials should ideally be used when you feel pressured in any way, whether it's by quota or by the players currently dead. But you shouldn't wait until you're in a mess before you use them. You need to be able to assess whether things are breaking down or you're struggling. This can just be because of the comp or because of poor positioning. It's hard to say this is the moment you should use specials, because it's never that black and white, and is rather almost an intuition-based judgment that you'll start recognising the more you play the game. The second thing that might help with quota only really works depending on the comp you have. This mainly applies to rollers, but may also be viable with strong rush weapons like Brellas, strong shooters, or powerful Grisco weapons. When the aggro switches to the person with the roller or the powerful weapon, you are relatively safe and you should absolutely use this time to run eggs. If your roller is doing their job well, and you can figure this out within the first 10 to 20 seconds of the wave, then you have no obligation to stand in front of them attempting to contest the slaying when you could be running eggs. Most of the unsuccessful runs I see are due to passivity. Remember, you are against the clock here. You need to have a bit of urgency towards the quota. There is always something you could be doing with your time in Salmon Run. If egg running is being done, you could use this time to recover ink, or recover lost turf around you, or look to start filtering newer chum spawning in. Think about the bigger picture here instead of inflating your own stats. Salmon Run is a team game, so use the time to help contribute to the team objective. perspectives. You can and should switch back to killing if you notice your role is struggling, or if you recognise your team is struggling in some capacity. And you should be mindful of the timer so you're back in position for the aggro switches, especially if you have a roller doing most of the work for you. If your roller isn't managing well or they don't seem to be taking their best position, then using specials will achieve a similar scenario and help alleviate some pressure. All this to say, you need to be always making sure you find moments to run eggs, especially on maps like Bone Rattle and Marina's Bay. Third thing is positioning relative to your teammates. I've spoken about the best places to position yourself during rush, however this is easier said than done and may not be so achievable in freelance if you feel resistance from your squad. You shouldn't really fight them here and you should work around them. Find positions where you can run eggs easily or throw them with safety without neglecting the killing of enemies. You want to avoid standing right next to players too, as if they get killed, you'll go down almost immediately too. You won't have safety to run eggs if you're too close to each other, and depending on what weapon you have, you might need to be stood apart from everybody else slightly to maximise your weapon. It's hard to say exactly what you should be doing here, as it varies depending on the weapon you have and the weapons your teammates will have. Ideally, you need to try and think about how to get the most out of your weapon you have from a killing perspective, but also from an egg running perspective. An example of this again is on Gonfish and Hydroplant. Sometimes I will deviate from the platform most used so I can work around egg collecting. It's important though to be aware of aggro timings and making sure you're close by when things switch, just so you don't get caught off guard. Some maps are easier than others for achieving quota. JSJ and Grounds have the eggs fall right at the basket, so you don't have to spend too much time chasing them. Other maps like Bone Rattle and Marooners force you to leave the concentrated area and run eggs because otherwise you will simply not reach quota. Again, this forces you to take note of weapon rolls and special use. It also forces you into managing ink consumption well and makes you think, is it safe to throw eggs or will it be better to run them? Can I combine egg throwing with damaging enemies, or should I use the time to manually deposit the eggs and refill my ink tank? These are all questions you should be asking yourself constantly during rush and applying them to the bigger picture of the wave. I've spoken about this in other videos, but this also brings up multitasking, the ability to do many things at once, or at the very least be aware enough of the surroundings so that you can make quick judgment calls. This involves knowing the time left, the players alive, what specials they have if they've used them, the current quota obtained versus quota needed, your specials, your weapon and its ink tank, your positioning on the map in comparison to your teammates, the enemies alive, the current target, the current vibe, the weather. It's kind of endless and a bit overwhelming. And maybe you're thinking, do you really always think about these things during Salmon Run? My answer is yes. It's kind of become a running joke with some of my friends that I have eyes everywhere when playing this game, because I always know what they're doing and what is happening. This is more important in freelance, and I've gotten to a point where I can tell you whether I'm going to pass a game within 30 seconds of wave 1. It's about making quick assessments of situations and then making the decisions I need to in an attempt to either overcome the situation at hand or continue with the task. Freelance is a wild card, and I know I'm going to have comments under this video that tell me you're the best player in every game of Freelance ever, but it's always your rando's fault, and that's why you're stuck at a rank and not progressing. The problem with this mindset is that A, it's false, your randos are making you lose every game. B, focusing on everything but yourself and what's out of your control is not a good mindset to have and will only ever hold you back. And C, if we're strictly talking about only rush, who cares if you lose rush? GG's, go next. I probably lose about 50% of rush games in Freelance because the mode is so broken. Oh, funny, talking about broken things. Rush really does amplify a lot of things wrong with Splatoon overall. When things fall apart, they feel impossible to overcome. The main issue I see often here is desync. This is when enemies appear in different locations, or you see eggs flying across the map, or you suddenly die to what feels like one hit instead of 3. This is especially frustrating when taking into account things like knockback from the enemies or your squid roll not parrying attacks the way you expect it to. Rush, due to the speed the enemies move at, makes desync really tricky to manage, and I want to stress that it's really out of your control. If the lobby is broken in this way, it may not be possible to overcome this. It's even worse on maps like Marina's Bay, as the eggs are not where you expect them to be. Marina's Bay is particularly bad due to the way the chum and goldies behave when rushing the boat. At higher EVPs, you'll notice them getting stuck or bugging out, meaning it takes them even longer to reach you at the basket. For this reason, you need to have someone in front of everybody else killing chum constantly to encourage more to spawn. This also leads on to issues like latency and disconnects. Latency or lag makes Rush awful because you're not in control and you will die for what feels like no reason. The aggro changes won't be smooth and eggs might be slow to run, making you waste time. You also struggle with things like knockback from enemies when you weren't expecting it to happen. You can mitigate these problems during normal waves, but it's really tricky to do so during Rush. These are things that you will experience and they will make your games much, much harder. Because this is an issue with connectivity in Splatoon itself, there is almost nothing you can do other than hope and pray you don't die due to lag. Finally, the most common issue here is people disconnecting, leaving you a player or more down. Rush is doable with 3 people, but you have to play almost exclusively defensively, especially if your comp is relatively weak in managing the lessers. This may involve using all your specials and may involve stalling, whichever way possible. As the quota is lowered, you won't feel as pressured to meet it, but you will need to be extremely cautious about switching from firing at the enemies to go collect those eggs. Ideally, you should have at least 2 people slaying throughout the wave, with the 3rd player flexing to run eggs, but again, this is wholly dependent on the weapons you have and the stage you're on. Playing defensively doesn't mean you stop killing, it just means you take less risks with your safety and aim to kill enemies earlier to prevent overwhelming yourselves. This leads me to my final point about meeting quota. In Freelance, I exclusively have the mindset of quota and survive. I always err on the side of defensive throughout all waves, but especially more during Rush. To me, in my head, the biggest priority for me is staying alive. I put my safety above everything else, and my reasoning for that is not because I'm selfish or because I think I'm better than others. It's because I know I will do what has to be done to pass. I've lost count of how many games I've lost because I died first and my teammates simply could not manage. One death leads to increased pressure on the others, and that's when things are likely to spiral out of control. Staying alive ensures you're always doing something to prevent that from happening. Even if it's just stalling to stay alive, you're still doing more than if you were dead. If stalling is what is needed to progress, then stalling is the way to play. That isn't to say you should default to stalling immediately because you're scared of dying, as that is a whole other issue in itself, which we'll discuss in the next points. But it's just to say that you should always be risk aware and be cautious of running into a situation you may not live through just for an egg or an extra kill. For me, I play Freelance aggressively wherever I can to reach quota as soon as possible. Once quota has been reached, I then prioritise my safety over further eggs. This isn't to say I run away or stop killing things, what I mean is I now ensure survival. This may look like different things. One instance of this is killing things earlier than you would normally just to remove a looming threat. It may also look like stalling if that's what needs to be done. In Rush, it means I stop putting myself in risky situations to run eggs because there is no need now, quota is met. It means I always have an eye on the timer and I'm always ready to burn through special to revive teammates. It means ensuring walls and escape routes are painted should I need them. It means I'm aware of my ink tank and take less risks with throwing bombs or eggs just to ensure I have paint. For slower weapons, this is harder to manage. However, the mindset I have is surviving the game. It's also worth mentioning that you should be looking to parry attacks wherever possible too, as this might keep you alive. Squid Roll, when it works, allows you to survive situations and live a little longer should you be at risk of taking too much damage too quickly. You need to reconcile something in your head when you're playing this game. If you're watching videos about strats, involving yourself in a community, or wanting to improve your gameplay, then you'll likely be, more often than not, the most experienced player in your lobby, especially at lower hazards. You can't expect your teammates to have in-depth knowledge of the game and the ways to min-max it when I think the majority of players play Freelance relatively casually. If you're watching this and wondering what you can do to win more games, focus your safety and remember your teammates may not be at the same level as you or know about certain strats. Surviving. With everything said already, I just want to talk about surviving. For most situations with Rush, quota should more or less be straightforward to meet, so surviving becomes the main issue. If you're able to slay all the chum consistently and manage your ink tank well, you'll be able to balance replenishing ink whilst running eggs. But I want to say that whilst the advice I've given is helpful, I appreciate that Freelance is mental at times, and Rush rarely runs smoothly due to the players you're with, the weapons you have, or things like lag, desync and eggs flying everywhere. You'll see teammates not using their weapons in the optimal way, or you'll see them panic and run everywhere instead of holding a firm position and playing aggressively or proactively. You will die, maybe multiple times, and there isn't much you can do to avoid this if the wave breaks down and chaos ensues. You will lose often, and like I mentioned before, I probably lose about 50% of rush waves in Freelance just because it's such a mess of a wave. It's also really difficult to understand the skill of your teammates if you're thrown into rush for wave 1, so oftentimes you'll feel unprepared for it. In situations like these, there's a couple of things I do to try to manage it. I've spoken about specials, but I encourage you to use them liberally, regardless if it's wave 1. It is so frustrating wiping in wave 1, so burning specials to help keep you alive may be the most important thing you do to avoid completely wiping. And I want to reiterate a point that I've made in other videos. Sometimes wave 1 will be the hardest wave you have, so not using specials because it's early is not a good reason. I also want to touch on something useful to start noticing in your games. If your teammates have weapons that need charging or are ink inefficient, and you have a weapon that fires quicker without those penalties, then start recognizing when your teammates need downtime to refill their ink tanks or charge their shots, and take the lead during those moments. An example of this is if your teammate has a paintbrush and you have a junior. Whilst the paintbrush is a solid weapon to have for rush, it can feel slow getting the first swing off, and it has a really punishing ink tank. As a junior in this situation, you can take note of when the paintbrush is refilling their ink tank and protect them while they do so. After they're able to fire again, you can take a moment to refill your ink tank or run eggs. It's little things like this that can help your teammates drastically and vastly improve outcomes in rush. Wall clinging. Okay. And my last point is a point of contention, perhaps, but I want to talk about stalling or wall clinging. Everything I've mentioned in these videos goes against the idea of stalling, as if you are using your weapons and specials effectively, with good positioning and good teamwork, you will likely never need to stall. Obviously, in Freelance, this isn't a guarantee, but I want to caution against using stalling as a tactic, as it rarely works.
We okay?
I'm just chilling. No, they jumped up. What the fuck?
They jumped up.
Bro, what jump scare? Thanks. This becomes even worse in higher EVP and at HLM, as when you stall, there will not be enough goldies spawning and you will struggle to make quota. In addition, when you stop stalling, there will suddenly be a massive influx of chum targeting one player, and it's extremely unlikely they'll be able to cope with that and will likely die quickly. Think about it this way. What are you doing with your time when you're stalling? You're not defeating chum or goldies, and you're not running eggs. You're effectively leaving your team a player down if you stall. Do not instinctively go to stall if you have weapons that can manage rush well, as you'll likely cause your teammates to copy what you're doing and face an almost unwinnable wave. There is a case for stalling, however, and I will mention it because it does have uses. Obviously, if you're the last player alive and you're waiting for your teammates' life rings to appear, stalling makes sense. If you have quota and your teammates are struggling, stalling may help you regain ink and may give you some space to charge a slow weapon. But in both of these cases, I'd argue that specials here is what you should do. However, I appreciate that sometimes you don't have the space or any specials left. If you're struggling to meet quota on some maps, then you may find wall clinging might help, but you have to hope your teammates understand what you're trying to do. There is a good chance they won't. There's also a good chance they see what you're doing, and instead of taking the moment to run eggs, they copy you instead. Once you've hit quota, you're essentially waiting out the clock in a lot of ways, and if you're struggling to defeat oncoming chum and your teammates aren't helping, then stalling may benefit you here. There are also ways to stall that can be minimal and serve as a quick breather, such as jumping between platforms, which can allow teammates to run eggs. All of this to say, stalling isn't something I'd recommend unless you have no choice. If you find your teammates in Freelance are trying to run stall tactics, you may have no choice but to join them, as you alone cannot take on the rush of chum unless you have a roller. If one person is repeatedly stalling and the other three of you are trying not to, you should be able to convince them by just playing as normal. It's tricky because maps like Bone Rattle and Sockeye seem to tell you that stalling is the way to go and that it's the most optimal strat. However, I watch freelancers use the rail or the walls and not help with defeating chum or running eggs. So what are they doing exactly, other than wasting time and preventing more goldies from spawning? Stalling is a tactic that has uses, and that merits discussion in some ways, but I often see people run to wall cling with no prior thought about how stalling will actually benefit the overall wave. It rarely does. Let me frame this in a way to make you think about it differently. Wall clinging wastes time. So if your current situation benefits from the wasting of time, then you can effectively stall this way. However, if you're pressed for quota, then wasting time will harm the chances of succeeding. This is where specials should be used instead. In my opinion, the more you need to stall, the more likely it is that you're not playing Rush in a way that will likely see you pass anyway. For any other wave type, you don't hope to pass by doing nothing, so why should this wave be any different? Though I say all of this, I appreciate that Rush is unique as a wave, and therefore unique strats do have value in unique situations. And the way I present this information may make you say, it ain't that easy, and I get that. I know how crazy Rush is in Freelance. If you only take away one thing from both of these videos, it should be this. Work with your team and not against them. Do not be too stubborn to switch strategies, and don't hang back spamming this way without helping. Your teammates might not know wall clinging is objectively bad in most situations, and sometimes you'll just have to do the best with what you have. Isn't that why we all love Freelance?
Should I have 40 seconds? What the fuck?
Oh, Jesus. Fuck.
No, it's fine.
I said, do you know what? Oh! I was going to say, I don't even mind losing that because 31 sucks. So.
It does, yeah.
Thank you so much to everyone who has liked, commented and subscribed off the back of these videos. I appreciate so much. It's also really nice to hear that the videos are helping people. I appreciate the feedback. If there's any other wave types you'd like me to cover, let me know. I'll see you soon.
Oh boy.
Kill me. Oh no, I'm scared.
I'm so sorry, Kills. I'm so sorry.
Oh wait, we don't have enough. It's never. Oh, I don't have anything. You're never gonna take me along.
I
Baby, ow!